If you're comparing Lincoln, Nebraska versus Omaha cost of living in 2026, the cheaper city might seem obvious at first, but the real cost difference depends on how you actually live. And just so you know, if you ever want help think you through something like this, Lincoln versus Omaha, or what might fit your situation better, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to talk it through. Well, here's the thing. This is usually where people get tripped up. They'll look up something like Lincoln, Nebraska versus Omaha cost of living 2026, scan a few numbers and try to make a decision from that. And on paper, it looks straightforward. But once you actually live in one of these places, the cost shows up in a lot of smaller day-to-day ways that don't really show up in those comparisons. So if you're thinking about moving to Lincoln, Nebraska, or you're trying to decide between Lincoln and Omaha, this isn't really about which one is cheaper on paper, it's about which one fits how you actually live. Well, let's start with housing, because that's usually where people look first, and it's usually people's largest expense. If you're comparing Lincoln, Nebraska versus Omaha cost of living, housing is where you'll see the difference pretty quickly. Lincoln tends to come in a bit lower, and that's whether you're buying or renting. You can get a little more space or a newer home or just something that feels a little more settled for the same budget. Well, in Omaha, there's just more variation, more density, more pockets where prices climb depending on the area. So depending on where you're looking, that number can move around quite a bit. But here's the part that matters more than people expect. What do you actually need from your housing? If your goal is to be close to certain job areas or you want something that feels more urban, Omaha might make sense, even at a higher price. But if you're looking for something a little quieter, a little more predictable, where your money stretches just a bit further, Lincoln tends to feel like better value. So yes, Lincoln is usually a bit cheaper in housing, but the more useful question is what that difference actually gets you in your day-to-day life. Now, let's talk about something that doesn't always get included in these comparisons, and that's commuting. This is one of those things that seems small until you experience it. So in Lincoln, getting around is pretty straightforward. You can get across town without really thinking about it. Traffic is lighter. It doesn't feel like you're planning your day around your drive. Less gas, less time in the car, honestly, just less friction in your day. 15 minutes usually gets you where you need to go. Omaha being larger, depends on where you live, more traffic, more time spent getting from one place to another, and that's a given. And again, that doesn't show up as a clear line item like rent or mortgage, but it adds up. So when people are comparing living in Lincoln, Nebraska versus Omaha, this is one of those differences that actually changes how your days feel. Now, everyday expenses, groceries, utilities, normal spending. On paper, these are pretty similar between the two cities, so you're not going to see a huge swing just because you're moving from Lincoln to Omaha, Omaha to Lincoln, living in a different place. But the difference shows up in how people live. So Lincoln tends to have a slightly slower pace and fewer situations where you feel like you need to be out spending money, and it's easier to fall into routine. So with Omaha having more going on, more restaurants, places to go, more options, which is great, but it also tends to pull a little more spending along with it. So even if the baseline costs are close, the lifestyle might push one higher than the other without you really noticing it. And so that's where this comparison can really shift. Because when people search Lincoln, Nebraska versus Omaha cost of living 2026, they're usually looking for a number. But what they're actually deciding is how they want their life to feel. Lincoln tends to feel more steady, more manageable. There are great local spots, trails, neighborhoods that feel lived in, but it's not overwhelming. And Omaha gives you more variety, more options, more activity, more going on. For some people, that's exactly what they want. For others, it comes with a cost, not just financially, but in how busy things feel. So when you're comparing cost of living in Lincoln, Nebraska versus Omaha, it really helps to step back and ask, what kind of day-to-day life am I actually trying to build? Now, from a real estate perspective, this is where it starts to come together. Once people understand how these costs show up in real life, it changes what they're looking for. In Lincoln, it's often space, quieter neighborhood, proximity to parks or trails. And in Omaha, it might be access to certain parts of the city, proximity to work, a more active environment in general. So the home itself becomes part of a bigger decision. Not just price, but how it supports your life. That's why two people with the same budget can end up having completely different experiences in these two cities. One feels like Lincoln gives them more breathing room, and the other feels like Omaha is worth the extra cost because it lines up better with what they want. So if you're trying to decide between the two, here's the simplest way to think about it. Lincoln is generally a bit more affordable, and it tends to feel more predictable. Omaha gives you more options and more variety, but usually at a slightly higher cost, and in more ways than one. Neither one is better across the board. Others may beg to differ, but it just depends on what matters more to you. So if you want something more manageable, steady, and a little quieter, Lincoln usually fits that pretty well. If you want more activity, options, and don't mind a little more cost and movement, Omaha might make more sense. So when you ask, is Lincoln, Nebraska cheaper than Omaha in 2026? The answer is yes, in some ways. But the more useful answer is how that difference shows up in your life. If you're thinking about moving to Lincoln, Nebraska, or if you're trying to figure out which one actually fits you better, Lincoln or Omaha, that's really what you want to understand. And if you want help working through it, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk through your situation, help you find some clarity and confidence in your options.